Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidushavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Let us meditate on the Supreme Reality present in all of us. Om peace, peace, peace. As you all know, today's topic for discussion is overcoming anxiety, the yoga approach. Now, when we discuss this topic of anxiety, normally modern psychiatrists, they try to analyze different phobias, panic disorders, generalized anxiety disorders, stress, obsessive compulsive disorders, and a few. These are the general categories. Suppose the research and investigations are progressing. But more or less, these are some of the most prominent manifestations of anxiety disorders. Now, one may very well ask this question: what has yoga to do with this? So at the very beginning, I must make it clear, we are not at all discussing the physical yoga, the different postures that they teach in yoga studios or yoga training camps. That's not the topic of discussion. What we are discussing here, going to discuss rather, is yoga psychology and the philosophy of life behind yoga psychology. which may help us to avoid anxiety-related problems or to remain in a state of permanent mental health. Health in the Indian School of Medicine is called swasthyam. You should remember there's a special reason why I'm explaining these things all the time, quoting from the ancient masters. Because there are two reasons. First, we cannot detach these great ideas from the great sages and saints who discovered these great secrets of spiritual and mental health from some 4,000 years back. If you detach these ideas, as they often do when they write books on mindfulness, without ever referring to Buddha, who was the original exponent of the very concept of mindfulness. Buddha's original discourse is called Satipatthana Sutta. It's never referred to, never quoted, never even, and readers are carefully prevented from even remembering that, to make it appear that the writer of this particular modern book is the exponent, original discoverer of mindfulness. So, in order to, in a way, to counter this trend, what I want to stress again and again, these are not my ideas. These ideas come from the ancient sources, from the ancient saints and sages who discovered these ideas at least 4 millennium back, around 2000 BC. Now, the ancient Indian medical science gives a very wonderful, comprehensive, rational definition to mental health. Swasthyam is the Sanskrit word, means health. Being in a state of permanent health, that's the real meaning. So, prasannatmendriya manaha swastha itya vidhiyate. This is the definition given in one of the two most ancient source books of Indian medicine called Susruta Sutras. It's called prasannatmendriya manaha. When your mind, senses, and intellect are always in a natural, spontaneous state of permanent contentment and tranquility and peace, then it is called mental health. And yoga philosophers stress again and again one very significant point. They say all problems of mind can be solved only at a level beyond the mind. Psychological problems can never have, mental problems can never have a solution at mental level. See, a patient cannot treat another patient. The one who treats a patient should be a doctor, a step above the patient. So also, psychological problems can be even properly analyzed and understood only at the spiritual level. And when you ascend to the spiritual level, by spiritual level we don't mean the level of an anthropomorphic creator God who sits above the clouds with a big stick in his hand. Not at all. What we are talking about is a state of higher consciousness that goes beyond the ordinary psychological realm. When you link your mind to a higher source, a consciousness that is beyond mind, then mind remains calm and quiet. So, that's the definition in the ancient Ayurvedic text called Susruta Sutras. Now, coming to the subject, well, as I mentioned, generalized anxiety disorders, social anxiety disorders, different kinds of anxiety disorders are there. I'm not going to deal with them as a psychiatrist deals with them, because they deal with these exaggerated worries, feeling on the edge, fear, tension, apprehension, irrational phobias, too much of irrational anxiety about everyday events taking place in our life, which are totally irrational and totally misplaced. These are the problems. What yoga tells you is you have to look for the real solution to a source that's beyond mind. So, yoga psychology analyzes the mental world in a very rational way. According to yoga psychologists, there are three elements to be considered when you analyze the mind. One is experience, the other is our reactions to experience, our psychological reactions to those experiences. Experience, we may sense the term that Patanjali uses, or the commentators on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras like Vyasa, Shankaracharya written Vyasa, Bhashi Vivarana, and Vijnana Bhikshu, Yoga Bhasha Vartigam, and many others, Vajaspati Misra. No, there are a number of authors. I'm not going to quote them, of course, except when there is absolutely a necessity for that. So, according to yoga psychologists, mind can be analyzed from an interesting standpoint, the standpoint of our experiences and the perspective of our reactions to those experiences. Experience is called bhoga, what we enjoy or suffer. These are two types of experiences. We enjoy or we suffer. And then reactions. Reactions can be twofold. Reactions can be in the form of extreme liking, attachment, appreciation, an obsessive attachment, an obsessive attraction, which is again a terrible bondage. When we analyze our mind, we very often find many of the problems are due to a kind of mental or psychological slavery. When we are drawn towards certain things through extreme attachment to certain things that we actually want to get out of, we are caught in a mental trap. If we are caught in a state of psychological, spiritual slavery. There are many people. See, for example, a drug addict or an alcoholic, chronic alcoholic, or persons who are addicted to computers, computer games. All these are some classic examples. Many of them are fully aware that these are not good for them. And they sincerely want to get out of them. But when they try to find a solution to the problem, very often they resort to certain means which only help them to postpone the problem or to avoid the problem for the time being and not to solve the problem. An alcoholic drinks to forget his worries. So also drug addicts. So very often we resort to certain means to get out of the trap, but frequently the means becomes these methods of postponing problems actually can be counterproductive, and the problems return with greater force in course of time. So this is due to this psychological trap, mental trap, slavery, a kind of psychological slavery. The other one is the opposite of this. It is called extreme dislike, aversion, hatred, dislike for certain things which we know very well need not be hated, need not be disliked, need not become objects of aversion. Still, we cannot but dislike those things. So hatred on the one hand and extreme infatuation or obsessive liking for certain other things. Both are equally strong mental traps. They become mental prisons. So these are two types of reactions to experiences. Experiences need not necessarily be sense experiences. See, when we feel happy or unhappy, or when we react to an external phenomenon. Let's say somebody talks to us in a rough language, uses a rough language. That can be at the gross level, how we react to that. So also how we react to our own hunger, thirst, happiness, unhappiness, anxiety, extreme jubilation, extreme enjoyment, excitement, and so on. So how to get out of this mental trap? That's what yoga is trying to reveal. This means. That's why the first sutra in the Yoga Sutras, that is actually it comes to Samadhipada, the first word, Atha Yoga Anushasana. Atha actually means now onwards. Now onwards means, suppose you have plenty of money, wealth, status, a great job, everything, but still feeling a mental vacuum within, taking pills and medicines for getting 4 hours sleep every day. So you have knocked all other doors, the doors didn't open, but you want some mental peace which we cannot buy for money in the markets, which nothing else can give, but some kind of inner contentment. And for this contentment, you are exploring, you are extending your investigation to higher transcendental level. That's the real meaning of Atha, means from now onwards we turn to yoga. That's the real meaning of it. Now, to understand the psychology of these, our reactions to these experiences, it's called dvega or udvega, means reactions to our own experiences and reactions to experiences caused by external factors. The loss of a job, the collapse of the markets, and also maybe inner tension, traumatic conditions, anxiety. So inner experiences and outer experiences, how we react. Now, the great psychologist who wrote commentaries on Yoga Sutra tells us something very interesting. If we can get a clear picture of how our mind works, how our own actions and thoughts influence our mind and personality, then perhaps we can bring about a change in the condition of our own mental health. One simple idea they put forward, I shall just refer to that, then come to the subject. We all know that mind influences actions, but we do not very often realize how our actions influence our mind. When we are disturbed, we are not able to do things properly with great concentration because mind gets fragmented, the attention, the focus is distracted. So very often we are not able to put the full force and power of concentration of our mind on what we are trying to do. So we understand how mind influences the way we act, the way we react to different situations. But how our physical actions, our gross physical actions can influence the mind for the better, how it can improve our mind, that is not properly recognized by modern psychologists. Of course, in the institutions, they introduce work therapy, but that's only to avoid, to keep the patients engaged in something so that they won't create much problem. But really speaking, our physical actions can change our mind. If a person goes on doing good deeds, goes on thinking good thoughts, goes on speaking good words, and lives in the world of good ideas and good actions, of course, good actions may be easier, good thoughts may not be easy. See, you can go and do some good physical work. If there is a garbage, you can clean it for the betterment of society. You can write a check physically, you can do for helping victims of earthquakes or natural calamities. Or you can do voluntary service. in a church or a synagogue or any charity institution you can do. But you cannot really take a decision that you will think good thoughts, because there is no GPS system possible for the mind. We cannot program our mind, though we can predetermine, we can define how we are going to do different things at the physical level, but we cannot decide what thoughts are going to emerge in our mind next moment. So, yoga psychologists say, if we go on doing good deeds, eventually these good deeds will create a kind of invisible spiritual capital. And that will refine the mind, that will calm down the mind. Any action, whatever we do, a word we speak or physical deed we do, they will produce a result that's not immediately felt or experienced. Every action leaves behind a residue which is called vritti. And these vrittis or residual effects of good actions will form a potential spiritual wealth which become a strong positive attitude. And these attitudes can become a tendency. This tendency can make you decide to do certain things in future. And so what happens is called karma vritti samskara chakram. It's a very interesting term. In fact, this is very well accepted and elaborated in the canonical literature, Pali canonical literature of the Buddhists. Karma vritti samskara chakram. Chakram means a wheel. Karma means action. Vritti means the residual effect of our actions. Samskara means the solidified, the reinforced vrittis which become an attitude. And this becomes a tendency to do certain things in a certain manner. And that will make you to do certain things, sankalpa. And then you continue doing the same things. So if we physically go on doing good deeds, then these good deeds will create a capital of positive impressions, memories, what you call samskaras, which are, these terms are vritti and samskaras, very much used in some of the latest modern books on psychology and psychiatry. So these tendencies and attitudes and residual effects of our actions, physical actions, remember physical actions, that's a very important word here, will create a spiritual capital. You know why physical actions? As I mentioned earlier, you cannot take a decision, tomorrow onwards I shall only think good thoughts. Your mind won't cooperate with you. Why? Because there is a great conflict going on between what you want to do and what you end up doing. What you end up doing, what you eventually do, is determined by your mind, emotions, not within your control. Intellectually you can decide, I will do certain things, I will think certain thoughts, I will speak certain words next moment, next day. But you may not be able to do that. Mind will create a stumbling block. And what is mind? Mind is the sum total of all these accumulated tendencies, impressions, and attitudes. So if we can do physical actions, which are very more or less within our control, it is very much within your control whether to take 580 or 480, I don't know the names of the freeways. It is more or less your decision. But it is not your decision what thoughts you are going to think next moment or what words we are going to speak next day. So the physical actions are more or less within your control. So why don't you make use of these physical actions, over which you have a lot of control, to influence the mind, to change the mind. So a person who goes on doing a lot of good actions, physical actions, will be eventually accumulating a huge spiritual capital. And this spiritual capital will manifest, will influence the mind in a way then mind becomes calm and quiet. So that again will give us another idea. There is a cause-effect relationship between action and results. And I say again, there is a cause-effect relationship between our actions now, in this life, and what we are going to experience in the next life. So to understand yoga psychology, we must believe in these two fundamental doctrines, which are perhaps not part of the Abrahamic religious traditions. One is law of karma, the other is reincarnation. Because yoga psychology tells you, you have a responsibility for building your future, not God. Yoga psychology won't agree with you if you say, I can do what I want to do in this life if I'm in the good books of God. No. Because you commit a mistake, you have a problem, because you sowed a seed which is now sprouting, becoming a plant in the form of a problem. So we are responsible. So we can take the burden on our shoulders by taking the responsibility in our hands, by doing good actions. And eventually, if a person goes on doing good actions, he will start thinking good thoughts. His personality will change. So, how this really happens? Yoga psychology gives a very interesting analysis of abnormal psychology and also the way a normal human mind functions. The abnormal psychology is analyzed on the basis of two principles. One is Kshiptam and Mudam. So, as a prelude to this topic, I must mention yoga psychologists, they divide the impressions and vrittis formed in the mental system under 5 categories in an ascending order. The first 2 categories belong to the abnormal level. One is Kshiptam and Mudam. Kshipta means restless. This restlessness again can be a kind related to anxiety. Well, why should we be anxious? One reason we become too anxious, or we become victims of phobic fears, restlessness, tensions, or irrational worry, is because we imagine that life is just one chance, and the problem that we experience right now, today, at this moment, is going to be permanent. So very often we interpret a momentary phenomenon to be something permanent. So the momentariness of empirical experiences, the changeable nature, changeability of empirical experiences is one important factor in yoga system. But you do not realize this at the early stage. Our mind is restless very often. These people who have this sort of restless mind in a chronic restlessness belong to the abnormal category. Then there is another kind of mental system. It is called Kshipta, where it becomes static, lethargic, inactive, unresponsive, a state of idiot or a moron. These are 2 states of abnormal mind that Yoga Sutra deals with. Of course, not Yoga Sutra as such, but Vyasa's commentary. The 3rd stage is very important because that is the state of a normal human being. It's called Vikshipta. So, this is natural. Very often, we want to do certain things, we are not able to do what we want to do. If we could do whatever we want to do, there would be no problem in the world. As I mentioned, the conflict between intellect and mind, the conflict between what we want to do and what our mind permits us to do. It's a big conflict, a wide gap. This is the state, the third state of human mind, called vikshipta, like a pendulum of a clock. The pendulum moves one direction, then it doesn't stop the middle, then it goes the other end. So we go to a library, we read a wonderful book, we are highly impressed. So this is a very fine idea. But then when we leave the library, then we are not able to retain the same interest. You listen to a lecture, or you think of higher values when you are in a church or a temple or a synagogue or a place of worship or a meditation center. You become aware of some higher values in life, but you come out of it, next moment or next day, you forget, or your identification with this noble idea, your conviction of this noble idea becomes weak. You feel it is impractical. So there is a momentary conviction, attraction for a noble idea, and there is a natural incapacity to retain that interest, that enthusiasm. So the pendulum of the clock moving from one end to the other end. This is the natural state of human mind. Of course, we are not going to deal with the fourth and fifth state. The fourth state is ekagra, where the mind becomes focused on one central noble idea. And then the fifth state, niruddha, means where the mind transcends this changeable, this restless state completely once for all. These are the 5 states. Now, coming to the subject, how do we reduce this changeability, restlessness, anxiety? In fact, anxiety is a manifestation that's natural for people who may not be able to retain their interest or their focus on one central noble idea for long. See, we are convinced of the greatness, the sublimity of a great idea when we read a book, or when we listen to a lecture, or when we pray and meditate. We are in contact with something transcendental, and we feel elevated. But then, after some time, next day, or maybe after returning from the temple or a church or from the library, then you feel, well, it's not going to be practical. So again, the intellectual conviction falls back to the mental level. So how to reduce this conflict? How to help, or how to make our mind, how to force our mind to cooperate with what the intellect wants to do? Or rather, how to narrow the gap between the mind and intellect? So one method that yoga philosophers project again and again, and that is a central philosophy of Buddhism, is the concept of momentariness of the empirical experiences. May sound a bit high-sounding, pompous expression, but that's how they put it. It's a fact that we can experience in our everyday life. Whatever we experience at the empirical level changes, not permanent. Everything. But then we know intellectually. In fact, the point is, what we know very well, we may not be able to implement in our real life. That's why many behavioral psychologists becomes abnormal through constant association with patients. See, this often happens, You may know very well how to behave as an ideal, socially well-adjusted human being. You may have written 5 books on the subject, but you won't be able to practice those disciplines in our everyday life. This happens. So what we know, we may not be able to practice. What we know theoretically, what we are convinced theoretically, intellectually, we are not able to implement at the mental level, because our mind doesn't allow us to do what we want to do. And mind again forces to travel along the same track, Mind is very conservative. Human mind is very conservative. It resists when you try to force your mind to think along a different track. Mind is very, very conservative. So there is a very interesting verse that comes from Shankaracharya, who in a very beautiful poetic language explains the perishable nature, the momentariness, the changeability of everything in this world. There is a verse which I shall try to quote and then explain. It's a Sanskrit verse. Nalini dala gada jalam aditaralam tadvad jivitam adishaya chapalam Vidhi vyadhyabhimanagrastam lokam shokahadam samastam. But the meaning is simple. The life of a human being is uncertain, like raindrops trembling on a lotus leaf. So the life of a human being, our life is as uncertain, as changeable, as insignificant, as subject to changes, as raindrops which fall on a lotus leaf. The raindrops do not remain steady on a lotus leaf. The raindrops start trembling. They fall down. Like that, this whole world is a prey to disease, ego, and grief. This is one approach to life. It is as well known in yoga as in Vedanta. Does it mean that life is so meaningless? Is it a very life-negating, pessimistic philosophy? Not at all. What the great philosopher tells you is this: the life as we normally understand and are familiar with, a life of sensual enjoyments, material pleasures, things we know intellectually to be impermanent, but still we are attached, obsessed with them. It is like a few raindrops falling on a lotus leaf. Now, it doesn't mean that we should have a negative attitude towards life, a pessimistic attitude towards life. Not at all. But if we can keep in mind the impermanent nature, the perishable, the transitory nature of these empirical experiences, it helps you to remain mentally healthy. Because most of the anxieties and fears and phobias are rooted in desire, are rooted in the idea that material wealth can bring us lasting peace and happiness. That's what really prompts us, forces us to do many things in this world. The fear of, for example, the irrational fear of a patient who is suffering from this pathological anxiety neurosis. There are patients who suffer from this problem. They closely read every word of Financial Times or important newspapers which deals with the fluctuations in stock markets. It's a natural problem. So also irrational fears and phobias are related to anxiety, different manifestations of anxiety. So, again, I told you earlier, there is a great philosophy of life behind the yoga approach towards psychological problems. A great philosophy of life. That's why, yoga tries to link human mind to a higher philosophy. As I mentioned earlier, psychological problems cannot have a permanent solution at the psychological level. It can have a permanent solution at the philosophical level, a philosophical system linked to spirituality. So, the understanding of the changeable nature, the momentariness of this world, of sensual experiences and enjoyments, is one way of making the mind more relaxed. In fact, this is a central principle in Buddha's teaching Dhammapada. In the, it was the end of Dhammapada. There are a number of verses in the Pali canonical literature, which has got a Sanskrit translation also, as old as the original Pali canon. You find Tambuhi Brahmanam, him I call Brahmin, is a wise man. Who is a wise person? So Buddha goes on expounding the different characteristics of a wise person, the wise man, which are almost verbatim translation, reads like translations of the 18 verses in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, from 55th to 72nd verse, which gives a list of the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person, Siddha Prajna. So Buddha says, a wise man is he who can remember in his everyday interactions with the world the truth of momentariness of this world. Now, how does momentariness help you to face psychological problems? The answer is this. Very often, we attribute permanence to impermanent momentary phenomena. We know money, wealth, status, all these are impermanent. But when we go out of the way to accumulate these things, thinking that they can bring us lasting peace, for a moment we forget the momentariness of all this, the transitoriness of all this. So that's why Buddha says, the one who can remember in his everyday activities this great ideal of momentariness, he is a person who can remain mentally and physically healthy all the time, which is exactly what Shankaracharya is trying to put forward. Then there is another very interesting approach in the Yoga Sutra, and that is that is related to the concept of dukkha, which I am going to deal with right now. Now, I have to mention one important point before taking up this subject. Very often, people think that physical exercises and breathing exercises can reduce tension and psychological problems like anxiety. It is actually the opposite of truth. Patanjali and the yoga philosophers are unanimous on one point. All these exercises should be taken up after we are already well established in certain fundamental moral, ethical principles. So the whole Yoga Sutra outlined the Eightfold Path can be divided into moral, physical, and spiritual. In the first two sutras, while explaining the Ashtanga Yoga, Patanjali emphasizes these fundamental moral, ethical principles before he ever mentions physical exercises or breathing exercises. Of course, he doesn't elaborate on the physical exercises. Sukhamasana, that's all. Sthira Sukhamasana. Asana, physical posture, is nothing but the ability to sit quiet for a long time in a steady, a relaxed posture. And all physical exercises which were later developed by other yoga psychologists who wrote Gherendra Samhita and Hatha Yoga Pratipika. They are all elaborate descriptions based on this single sutra of Patanjali Yoga system. But before he takes up this physical exercises and breathing exercises, he emphasizes one important point. That is, one should get fully established in the fundamental, universal, ethical principles of morality, which in a way helps you to remain steady in a state of yoga yoga mind, we call yogic mind, so to speak. Yama and niyamas, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, shauja, santosha, tapasya, adhyaya, isapridhana. I shall explain in English. Non-violence, mentally, physically, verbally, to be always in a state of total and complete freedom from any violent tendency, violent thought, or violent idea, or purity of life. Total freedom from greed to possess what belongs to others. If you're free from greed, desire, then a lot of problems of anxiety can be reduced. If we can always remember that money, wealth are impermanent things, and if you become free from greed, then you won't be too anxious about the collapse of stock markets, not that you become inactive. But the pathological anxiety, the obsessive anxiety can be avoided. We know this, we may read these books again when we read the newspaper reports, and then suddenly we forget, and we are again caught in the mental trap. So that's why Patanjali says, total freedom from greed, desire for possessing what belongs to others, and a pure mind, and total freedom from any violent deed or thought or idea. And again, inner contentment, what we call, santosha, inner purity. All these can help us to reach a state of mental stability. Then only breathing exercises are helpful. Otherwise, breathing exercise can aggravate, hyperactivate our natural tendency. If a person with a strong violent tendency, if he starts breathing exercises, he can become a manic patient. He can become a very violent person. If a greedy person practices breathing exercises, his greed may increase. Our natural tendencies can get aggravated or hyperactivated when we practice breathing or physical exercises beyond the limit. So what Patanjali says is, before we undertake these exercises, which generate heat and energy, and which activate or hyperactivate our natural tendencies, our tendencies should be refined, processed, should be properly disciplined by the practice of these moral and ethical disciplines, which is called yamas and niyamas. This is a very interesting point that he makes it here. So that's an important point, remember. Of course, there is one central principle, and Patanjali mentions that, commentators elaborate on this point. Regular breathing is characteristic of a man of stability of mind. So if we can artificially regulate our breathing system, it can, in its turn, help us to stabilize the mind, to reduce anxiety and these problems. But that is only partially true under certain conditions. Unless the person is disciplined by following these disciplines, it can be counterproductive. After that, I'm going to take up the most important topic on this particular subject. That is, one important theory that Patanjali puts forward is, that is very, obstacles and problems are not, rather, anxieties or psychological problems are not necessarily obstacles. That's his theory, to put it in a more simple language. Psychological problems need not be an obstacle. Apparently, it may sound a bit contradictory. It's an inherent conflict. So he puts this subject of parinama dukkha. So dukkha is a term that Patanjali uses here. And the term is used in yoga system elsewhere and also in Buddhist tradition, dukkha. The English translation, the plain translation is grief or sorrow. But Patanjali sublimates this concept to a higher level. And that is his great, unique contribution. So there's a sutra in the Sadhanapada, 15th sutra. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavritti virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. The meaning is simple. I'm not going to elaborate on this sutra, but I'm going to take up one important aspect of this sutra. The meaning is this: to a person of spiritual wisdom, discerning mind, everything in this world is sorrowful, because the suffering results from the momentariness of everything that we experience. This is the simple meaning of the sutra in short. But there's one word used here, parinama dukkha. Now, Patanjali uses only this word. But the great commentator Vyasa, who wrote a commentary on Patanjali Yoga Sutra, his great contribution, one of his greatest contribution on this yoga commentary is this exposition, elaborate exposition of the concept of sublimation of dukkha. Here, dukkha is not what you call normally, what you call grief or sorrow. Rather, it is a manifestation of a noble spiritual seeker, manifestation of a thirst for higher spiritual wisdom. It's a manifestation of search for higher spiritual truth or wisdom. Parinama dukkhada nama pratikula sukhavasthayam abhi yoginameva krishnadi, the Vyasa's commentary. And some other commentators commenting upon Vyasa's commentary links it to Buddha's own life. So why is parinama dukkha? See, if you have got everything going on well for you, suppose you have got a very good job, very happy family, plenty of money, everything going on fine for you, nothing to complain about, absolutely no problem, from the worldly perspective, let us say. Still, if you feel some kind of inner discontent, dissatisfaction, a vacuum, you feel, I'm still looking for something. This is a kind of divine, or what we call higher dissatisfaction, higher discontent. If you can sublimate your ordinary problems to this higher problem, then we can solve all psychological problems. That is Patanjali's view. And the commentators give the example of Buddha, not that everyone can be a Buddha or should strive to be one, but the example may be worthy of some explanation here. He was born a prince, led a luxurious life till he was 28 years old, and then one day while traveling in the street, the city, he saw a dead man's body being taken to the cremation ground. He saw a sick man, an old man, and then also he saw the face of an ascetic who was not as comfortable as he himself. Buddha was living in a palace. This ascetic was living in a forest. And he didn't have wealth or anything, but there was total contentment and happiness and joy on his face. So Buddha wanted to be like that ascetic. And that night he left, so he became Buddha. That's how the story goes. He traveled 1200 miles, came to Bodh Gaya, sat under the tree with a strong determination, which I'm not going to detail, but there is a very wonderful verse in the Lalita Vistara, which is a description, poetical biography of Buddha. Ihasane sushudu me shariram tagasti mamsam chivilayam chayadhu aprapi siddhim bhujanma durlabham naivasana kayamatas salishyade. This is a great verse. Buddha's strong vow is graphically described by the great poet, the author of Lalita Vistara. He says, Buddha took a strong vow. I am going to sit under this tree. I won't get up from here. Let my body perish. Let it be reduced to flesh and bones and marrow. Still, I won't get up from here till I get the highest spiritual wisdom. And he became Buddha in course of time. That's how the story goes. The idea is, what was Buddha worried about? He was worried about something which was not his private worry. He had no problem, he had nothing to worry about. So, if people can learn to worry about something higher, to become anxious about something higher, then that's one way of solving this problem. Remember, this is not a solution to chronic patients who may be in need of medical treatment. I am here mostly dealing with people who are manifesting the symptoms of what you call generalized anxiety. Not extreme cases of patients suffering from phobias or stress-related post-war stress, traumatic problems or anything. I'm here dealing with problems related to what they call in the language of modern psychiatry, it's called generalized anxiety problems, where you become anxious without any reason, you become anxious about anything. Phobias and stress and panic problems are specialized, specific problems, examples of anxiety. But generalized anxiety deals with kind of irrational anxiety about everything. You feel unnecessarily anxious or worried, fearful about things. And very often, you know there is no ground for you, no reason for you to be anxious, till you become anxious. So, in such cases, it is possible for us to learn to be anxious about something higher. So, that's the contribution of Vyasa. Remember, from yoga psychology, I want to present before you certain ideas which are not found in the traditional received psychiatric literature. So, Vyasa's contribution is very valid. If one can learn to sublimate problems, then problems can be solved at a spiritual level. That's one unique contribution of Patanjali system. Again, the idea that whatever we do, whatever actions we perform, will create a mental residue in the form of a tendency or impression, which gets accumulated in the mental system, which may again manifest again or remanifest again, if not in this life, the next life. That's also a very great, helpful tool for solving these problems. Because modern psychology always takes for granted that life is just one chance. Of course, it is not possible for modern psychiatry, mainstream psychiatry, to accept the idea of law of karma or the doctrine of reincarnation. It is not possible. Very often it is considered to be an invasion of religion into psychiatry, but it's not really so. The logic that we employ to interpret a problem by linking it to some childhood experiences like phobias, obsessions, all these can be, the hypnotists and psychiatrists try to find a reason, a background explanation for this by tracing these problems to some childhood or early life experiences and try to explain this in the light of some experiences in previous life. The same logic can be extended beyond this life cycle. That's what yoga system tells you. Those who accept it can find some very rational interpretations for this. For example, multiple personality problems, so many sort of these obsessive problems and then schizophrenic problems can be properly explained, if we can link these problems to a source that goes beyond this life cycle by extending the logic of cause and effect beyond the present life cycle. So that's how Patanjali traces some of these problems. As I mentioned, so two great contributions of Patanjali is this yoga system. One is the concept of samskaras. There's a unique contribution. Again, the concept of parinama dukkha, another unique contribution. What is samskara? Samskara means what you do now doesn't end today, this moment. What you do now, you may forget what you've done today, this morning, this moment. But this action produces a result which is invisible. It produces a result which is visible, tangible. You give money to a person, the other person gets help, he is helped. It becomes a help for him. That is tangible, visible. But the good work you do produces an after effect, a consequence which may not be felt or experienced in this life cycle, but it is not lost. It remains with you. And it doesn't die with you, because death is not the full stop of our life journey. It is only a semicolon or a comma. So when you are born again, we are again born with this baggage of what we call samskaras. This is also a unique contribution of Patanjali and Vyasa, samskaras. It's a very interesting description. In fact, the concept of karmasaya, where you find the word karmasaya, in the yoga system. Karmasaya is nothing but a repository of many of the strong tendencies and impressions that we produce through our actions in this life. These tendencies and impressions do not manifest again in this life, they manifest only in the next life. So many of strong tendencies, strong attitudes, we do not have an explanation in this life. It cannot be traced to any experiences of this life cycle. They are coming from another source, the previous life cycle. Because the samskaras follow you when in every life cycle, one after the other. So, if, for example, some of these problems can be explained in the light of samskaras, that can be used as a useful tool in counseling. Because in many of these problems, once a patient recognizes the problem and its reason and explanation, he is free from the problem. That's an interesting thing in psychology, psychiatry. Once you understand the nature of the problem, that moment you are freed from the clutches of the problem. So, this concept of samskaras, that is the idea that our actions, words and deeds do not end at the moment. They are all deposited in a reservoir of impressions called karmasaya. And these samskaras, these tendencies, they remanifest, not in this life cycle, but the next life cycle. And again, sublimation of obstacles, sublimation of psychological problems, giving them a spiritual promotion, a spiritual ascent or lift, parinama dukkha. These are some of the unique contributions of Patanjali and Vyasa and the commentators. But unfortunately, there is a wide gap, a cultural gap. That's one. Another one, there is also the problem of prejudice. Prejudice can be explained like this. You are right, I am wrong. Still, I won't accept you. They may accept or admit in private, but not when they present a paper on the Medical Association or Psychiatric Association conferences. So that's one thing. It may take time for the paradigms to change. But anyway, it is very, very remarkable that 4,000 years back, these great saints and sages, through their investigations and explorations, discovered some of these unique, mysterious secrets of the human mind. So this is when you talk about anxiety, you have to talk about yoga psychology, which is a very, very vast subject, and I can do very little justice in a lecture lasting for an hour. So thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Jaya Ram, Shri Ram, Jaya Ram, Rama, Ramanam, Shamanam, Bhav, Tap, Bhayakul, Pahi Janam, Jaya Ram, Rama, Ramanam, Shamanam, Bhav, Tap, Bhayakul, Pahi Janam, Mahimandala, Mandala, Charutaram, Rit, Sayak, Chap, Nishangvaram, Jaya Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram. Muni Manasa Pankaja Bring Baje Raghuveer Maharana Dheer Ajay. Muni Manasa Pankaja Bring Baje Raghuveer Maharana Dheer Ajay. Tav Naam Japami Namami Hari Bhav Rog Maha Madman Hari. Jaya Ram, Shri Ram, Jaya Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Gunashila Kripa Paramayatanam Pranamami Nirantar Shri Ramanam Raghunanda Nikandaya Dvandadanam Mahi Pal Vilokaya Deen Janam. Jaya Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Jaya Ram, Shri Ram, Jaya Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Jaya Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Jaya Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Jaya Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram.
Now we have announcements. The subject for next Sunday is the psychology of true happiness. Childcare is provided during our Sunday lectures. On Wednesday evenings, we have Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. On Friday evenings, a scripture class is held in Vivekananda Hall at 7:30 p.m. The current text for study is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. On Sundays, all are welcome to use the library from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of these services. As usual, after the lecture, there will be a question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and all are welcome. Thank you. Om Dyo Shantirantariksham Shanti Prithvi Shantirapah Shanti Oshadhaya Shantihi Vanaspataya Shanti Vishvedeva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shantihi Sama Shantiredhi. Unto the heaven be peace, unto the sky and the earth be peace. Peace be unto the waters, unto the herbs and the trees be peace. Unto all the gods be peace, unto Brahman and unto all the whole creation be peace. May that peace be unto me. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.